listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. Here's your Overwatch League daily episode for January 7th, 2018. Before we get started, I do want to let everybody know, the past month we haven't really had any Overwatch League games. It's been a lot of speculative or analysis type shows, which I think has been really fun and really cool. But getting into next week, we're going to start doing a lot more real-time analysis. What that means is, if a game's played on Wednesday, on Thursday morning, we're going to have people on the show ready to talk about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the show. As I said before, we're just 3 days away from the inaugural season. Starting next week, we're going to see 12 matches weekly over 10 weeks, over 4 stages. A lot of Overwatch. As we head into the season, we're going to take a day to put our money where our mouth is and make some predictions about where we think these teams are going to end up at the end of the season. Today, I'm joined by captain for Kungarna, mykL, and he's going to discuss his rankings going into the inaugural season. So let's start with how you came up with these rankings. What type of criteria are you using when you're developing your rankings?
Well, when I look at my criteria, I kind of take a little bit of everything. A big indicator, though, definitely was the preseason. And what the preseason showed me a lot was that a lot of the teams are on a similar level and they can really compete with each other. I liked how each team kind of had a different identity as well in the preseason. And it showed that whoever can adapt the best will win. So that kind of ties into like coaching and previous time together as well. So if they have a really strong coaching staff, then that team will be able to adapt in game a lot easier. As well as if they have spent a lot of time playing together. So even if they are a newer team, as long as they have practiced a lot leading up to this. So like, for example, a lot of people are saying Boston Uprising, Los Angeles Valiant, San Francisco Shock, they have been practicing a lot. And then compared to a team like Philadelphia Fusion, who haven't really even had a chance to practice going into this. So for that reason, it could be easy to say that Philadelphia Fusion aren't going to perform that well early on into the tournament. So there's a bunch of factors that you take into consideration when ranking the teams. But again, I think my main factor was the preseason and seeing how teams performed. Seeing how kind of like Dallas Fuel looked a little sloppy. Yeah, people can say they were experimenting things, which they probably were. But again, every single team was experimenting different comps, different game styles, all that type of stuff. And then seeing Houston Outlaws put up a great performance against them and being one Koth round away from taking that win really proved to me that a lot of these teams can take games off each other. So again, the preseason definitely a big indicator, as well as how long the coaching staff and players have been playing together and how much time they're putting in coming into the regular season.
I think another big factor that people maybe aren't including as of yet are how some of the mid-season signings and players coming of age could impact the final results. In your opinion, how big of a factor should that be?
So I think the signing of players in the midseason will have a big impact on some of these teams, as well as like some of the players who have underage players coming in. So like Sinatra, Super coming in for San Francisco Shock. I think they'll make a big difference, even though I believe San Francisco Shock is still a strong team and they could make playoffs with the roster they have now. Introducing Super and Sinatra into that lineup will definitely make them a strong contender. I definitely think teams like Miami Mayhem will definitely need to look into signing players at the midseason, because I just don't know in the long run that having only 6 players is the right play. I think being able to have certain players that specialize in one specific role and putting them in the game where that specific role is at its strongest will really shine through, especially when it comes near the end of the season. As well as teams like London Spitfire, who have 2 different 6-man rosters at a high level competing against each other in practice, is honestly just such an advantage. I talked about this in one of my videos where 2 tanks on London Spitfire, Fisher and Jester, are both world-class main tanks, and they're on the same roster. These 2 players are only going to push each other to become better. They're going to challenge each other and therefore learn off each other. And because of this, they're already world class, 2 of the best main tanks in the world. They're going to get even better. How is somebody like Seawoosh, who's already new to his role and doesn't have somebody on his roster who plays the same role, who can help him learn? How is he going to keep up with those guys? I really don't know how. He's already far behind. How is he going to close that gap? It's only going to get larger in my opinion. So a team like Florida Mayhem definitely need to look into picking up new players during the mid-season signings, as well as some other rosters like Shanghai Dragons, who only has 7 people. So I think it'll definitely be a big factor for some of the teams. A team like London Spitfire, obviously they already have 12 people, so they don't need to. But then again, Florida Mayhem only has 6. So for them, it will be big.
I don't want to give away your top picks just yet, so let's start with the bottom. Who, in your opinion, do you expect to finish closer to the bottom?
So it's hard to say exactly who is going to fall in the bottom 4 going into the season. I put Florida Mayhem, Shanghai, Boston, and LA Gladiators on the last 4 spots of my rankings after the preseason, but that can easily change. If I had to pick some, though, that would be down there, I'd have to say Florida Mayhem and Shanghai Dragons both will stay near the bottom. Teams like Boston Uprising and LA Gladiators, I believe they have the potential to easily grow as teams and become strong contenders and make pushes for the playoffs. As for Shanghai Dragons and Florida Mayhem, it's hard to see in Shanghai's roster how much potential they have. During the preseason, they looked decent, but nobody really shined through besides Daya. They're going to have to make some moves during the midseason signings to make their roster stronger. If they don't, I could definitely see them staying at the bottom, and the Florida Mayhem are also in a similar situation. I can easily see them staying at the bottom if they don't sign some strong players during the midseason signings. And if I had to put one more team down there with them, I'd have to say probably Philadelphia, just because they haven't had much practice yet, but it is an extremely long regular season. What a lot of people aren't realizing is that there's 40 games to be played, and that doesn't count the title matches during the stages. So 40 total games during the regular season. That is a lot of time. I think it's over the course of 5-6 months, 40 games played. That is so much time for any of these teams to improve vastly. So it's hard to say which teams will be the bottom ones. It's much easier to say which ones will be the strongest. But if I had to pick, Shanghai, Florida, and Philadelphia would definitely be the ones I would expect to be at the bottom at the end of the regular season.
So let's get into it then. What about your top 4?
So my top 4, I think it's easy to say that like Seoul Dynasty, London Spitfire, Dallas Fuel, and New York Excelsior will be in the playoffs, and that they will be near the top 4. Maybe not exactly, but they will most likely make the playoffs. And how do I determine how does number 1 beat number 2? It's tough to say. Going off the preseason, I think Seoul Dynasty looked the strongest. Going in, I thought London would be the strongest, but after GC Busan roster struggled a lot against the Los Angeles Gladiators, Seoul Dynasty just looked like a more well-rounded team. But I think as many people know, London Spitfire just had a little hiccup in the preseason. The GC Busan side of the roster will be strong, ready to go come the regular season. And especially when it gets long down the road, Seoul Dynasty, London Spitfire, Dallas Fuel, New York Excelsior, they have all competed in tournaments with similar rosters of what they have now. They have that hardcore experience, especially going into big finals of events like Contenders, Apex finals, stuff like that. Every one of those 4 teams is made up of rosters who have high level experience. And because of that, I think it's easy to say that they'll be in the top 4. I don't know who's going to beat who. If I had to say which team would win the championship, it would probably be Seoul Dynasty or London Spitfire. But again, it's really tough to say what will happen. There's 40 games in the regular season. By playoff time, who knows? One of these teams might not even be in the playoffs. Now, yeah, that's a bold statement to say, but it's definitely something that we can't think will never happen.
I think the big takeaway right now is that there's pretty universally understood rankings for the top 4 and the bottom 4. What I'm really excited to hear your opinion on is how about some of the sleepers, some of the people who could surprise or even disappoint?
I've kind of gone into this topic a little bit throughout the other questions. Basically, it's just a lot of the teams can take games off of anybody at any time. As we saw in the preseason, Boston Uprising gave New York Excelsior a huge run for the money. Going into the preseason, people expected Boston to be one of the worst teams in the league. Well, they took a map off New York, and with a few less mistakes, the set could have gone the other way. Same with San Francisco Shock. A lot of people were counting them out. They're saying, oh, they're not going to be very good till they get Super and Sinatra on their roster. They're going to struggle. Well, they went out there, they put up a good fight, they took out Florida Mayhem pretty easily, and then they had an intense, insanely close match against the Los Angeles Valiant after playing 4 maps prior to that. So I think San Francisco Shock and Boston Uprising both impressed a lot of people, and they're less of sleeper picks going in, but still going into the regular season, I think San Francisco Shock, Boston Uprising can take games off of London Spitfire, Seoul Dynasty, and just in general, like I said, there's so many games. All these teams, as long as every team is working hard, putting in the effort, their coaching staff is strong, any team can beat any team at any time. It's kind of similar to a basketball regular season or hockey regular season. There's so many games. The team that ends up winning the Stanley Cup at the end of the year, if you look at their regular season, they lost to some of the worst teams in the league. Why? Well, there's so many games. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to be prepared for every single game. It's hard to stay in shape. Yeah, it's not a physical sport, but you have to mentally be prepared. You have to mentally be ready for every single game. And as soon as one team starts slacking off, as soon as they start taking an opponent lightly, that opponent's going to take a game off of them. So in general, I think just every team team is a sleeper. Every team that people don't expect to win is a sleeper pick. Even Shanghai, Florida, both of them, they can easily be sleeper picks. They can easily take games off the top teams. Even if they're at the bottom of the rankings near the end of the season, they're still going to have some wins racked up. They might be 10-30, who knows, but that's 10 games they won. And one of them very well could be off a top 4 team.
One of the key aspects of the Overwatch League format is the 4 different stages with bonuses at the end of each stage. How important do you think that these stages are as far as end of season results?
I think every game is going to count, especially for the teams in the middle of the pack. I think the amount of games that will decide who makes the playoffs and doesn't will be very minimal, like 2 to 3 games, even 1 game. There could even be tiebreakers to decide who makes the playoffs. I think the middle of the pack is going to be the best part of the season. Teams like Houston Outlaws, New York Excelsior, Dallas Fuel, LA Valiant, San Francisco Shock, Boston Uprising, they're all going to be neck and neck once it comes to the end of the season. And I think there are crucial games during the regular season that a lot of people aren't taking account for. One game, literally one game that Dallas Fuel and the Boston Uprising played 3 months ago in Stage 2 could be the deciding map or the deciding match that puts one team in the playoffs or not. We see that type of stuff all the time in the NHL and the NBA. When it comes to playoff times, 1 point decides who makes it in or not. It's kind of similar to the match that I played against Cloud9 in Contender Season 0. We played a total of 24 maps, and after those 24 maps, our teams are tied dead even in points. So we played a 1 best of 3 on Oasis to decide who would move on. Now, yeah, that was Contenders and this is Overwatch League. I'm just trying to provide insight on how close it will be. And honestly, if it comes down to that, a 1 best of 3 to decide who makes the playoffs in the Overwatch League Season 1, that would be absolutely insane and amazing for the spectators and fans. So moving forward, yes, I think every stage match counts. I hope no teams take any games lightly, because if they do, they're going to end up losing them. And that would be horrible for them to take a game lightly and that game be the one that kept them out of the playoffs. But I don't expect many teams to be taking any teams lightly. I think everybody's taking this very seriously, especially the coaching staffs, the organizations. They've put so much money into getting these teams, $20 million just to get a spot, and then the salaries for the players, the coaches. I think the coaches, they know the opportunity that is in their hands. I think they're going to be working the players very hard. I think everybody's going to be taking it seriously. And if people aren't, then they're not going to last very long in the Overwatch League. But yeah, thank you for having me. This was awesome. I loved answering all these questions. I listened to the show. Keep doing what you're doing. Overwatch League Daily Show. Thank you for having me.
My thanks to Michael for being on the show today. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at king_Michael. That's mykL. Loved having him on the show. Would love to have him back anytime. Remember, you can find the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spotify, or on the front page of winstonslab.com. As far as what we've got going on next week, I actually can't say, because I'm not 100% sure that we're going to have the guest on who we think we're going to have on. So I just don't want to say it yet until it's confirmed. Either way, it's going to be a special one. This is the last episode before the inaugural season kicks off. So I want to thank everybody for sticking through it with us for the past month. We created a lot of content when there wasn't a lot of games going on. We had a lot of amazing guests on. Thank you to each and every one of you who have been on the show, who have listened to the show, recommended it to a friend. I really appreciate it. And also thank you for the 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's amazing. I never thought that we would have hit 1,000 subscribers on my little channel. So thank you all very much. We are on YouTube, so go ahead and click on the link in the show notes to find us. And if you want to stay in touch, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWL Daily Show, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWL Daily Show. And of course, you can just go to overwatchleaguedaily.com and find links to everything right there. That's going to do it for the last episode of the preseason, or pre-preseason. We thank you guys for hanging out, and we'll see you on Wednesday with the first show of the regular season.